Can you guys introduce yourself to the camera, please?
Go for it. Okay, yeah, so I'm Phill Rose. I'm a graduate student here at the University of Regina. I'm going into my second year of my master's degree, so that means I've been studying biology at university here for, this will be my 6th year now.
And I'm Gabriel Foley, and I'm also a master's student in the biology department at the University of Regina, and I just wrapped up my second field season.
What made you decide that you want to study birds?
Well, for me, the big thing was I've always been really interested in wildlife and the outdoors, so I thought it was great that I could try and find a career that kind of paired both those together. The reason why I chose birds, mostly it's just such a diverse animal group. There's a lot more birds in some of these grassland areas that I work in than amphibians or mammals or reptiles. So you get to deal with a wide range of species, and birds come in all sorts of shapes, sizes, colors, a lot of different life strategies as well.
Yeah, I've always been interested in birds pretty much since I was a kid, and so it was kind of a natural thing to lead into. And a lot of my reasonings are the same as Phill, but I will add that birds are also really good indicator species of how an ecosystem's doing. So if you can measure the health of the bird population, you can see how well the rest of the ecosystem is doing.
What birds are you studying?
So I'm focusing my research on grassland songbirds. So these are the small, usually sparrow-sized birds. But more specifically, I'm looking at the grassland songbirds that are species at risk right now. So the examples of these are Sprague's pipits, Baird's sparrows, bobolinks, McCown's longspur, and chestnut-clawed longspur.
And I'm just studying one species. I'm looking at the common nighthawk, which is kind of a pigeon-sized bird. Not a hawk at all. It's actually more like a nocturnal swallow. So they feed at night, and they just fly through the air eating insects. And so they're part of this group of birds called aerial insectivores, which just means that they eat bugs while they fly. But this group of birds is declining faster than any other group of birds in Canada. And nobody knows exactly why that is. So there hasn't been a lot of research done on nighthawks to figure this out. And one of the places where they're studied least is the boreal forest, which is the northern forest in Canada. Covers about half of Canada's landmass. And it's really difficult to get up there, but it's also where nighthawks appear to be most abundant. So my research focuses there.
What sort of field research do you do?
So my field of research consists of going out and doing a series of grassland bird surveys throughout southwestern Saskatchewan. So I'll go to a specific point and I'll spend 5 minutes there. I'll record all the birds that I either see or hear at that location. Then once the bird surveys are done, I do a bunch of measurements to try and characterize the type of grassland that's there. And these will kind of act as predictors why you might be seeing a bird at one location and not at the other one. So some of the things I look at are grass height and density, as well as shrub occurrence, litter mass, which is the amount of dead plant material that kind of accumulates year after year. This is important because they use this for a lot of their nesting cover early in the spring. And yeah.
And I'm looking at how nighthawks choose their habitat that they live in. So I am looking at how forest fire affects them. So do they prefer to live in forests that have been recently burned, or do they not like that at all? So I go out and I count the number of birds that are in burned forest and count the number that are in unburned forest to get at that. And then I also catch them and put radio transmitters on them and track them down to see where they're spending their days and sleeping.
And what did you find? Which one did they like better?
They way prefer forests that have been burned. Yeah,
That's cool.
it is cool.
What do you do so you don't endanger the birds you're researching?
Mine's quite easy because it's what we call passive surveys. So it's meant to minimize the disturbance of birds. You don't actually go out and capture any birds or handle them. You just kind of observe them from a distance. But some of the ways we can help minimize disturbance is limiting the number of times we go out to a grassland area during the breeding season. We also approach sites on foot, so you're not driving out into a grassland and scaring them all away. We try and keep it as minimal impact as possible.
And we also have to go through animal care approval. So there's a committee here at the university that you submit a proposal of your work to, and they review it and see if you can either find a way to involve animals less, or if you can't, whether your research, if it meets a good enough criteria. Just to make sure that we're treating the animals properly.
What are the most important things we can do as individuals to help birds in Saskatchewan?
I think the big thing is just creating some awareness of, on my end, is just creating some awareness about these grassland songbirds. A lot of them are very nondescript, secretive birds, so not a whole lot of people know about the Sprague's pipit and what kind of shape it is in. Another thing is just letting them know about ranching in grassland birds. So a lot of people think that having cattle is a bad thing for birds, but it's actually a really good thing because they're used to that regular disturbance in grasslands, and they need that grazing to kind of maintain it at an optimum level. So a lot of it is just education.
Yeah, common nighthawks are found here in Saskatchewan too, on the prairie, and they like the native grasslands best, and the native grasslands are one of the fastest disappearing ecosystems we've got in Canada, but a lot of people don't realize that grass isn't just grass from a wildlife perspective. So preserving those native systems is super important.
Yeah, and I guess the next thing too would be lobbying for policy changes too. So trying to stop any destruction of native grassland. We have so little bit left that maybe lobbying to keep what we have there, and maybe changing policies that don't make it so enticing for farmers to till it up and try and crop it.
I believe this one because I think the answers to these questions would be good even for me asking.
Yeah.
So in terms of farmers who say, I'm going to give my land back to become more natural again, does that help a whole lot?
It definitely helps because it ensures kind of that land will stay protected.
Right, but if it's already been cut and hayed or whatever, and you say, okay, I'm not going to hay it anymore, I'm going to let it go back to as natural as possible. Obviously, some of those species can come back, but not all of them.
Right, and there's not a whole lot of work that has been done in the past of trying to return native prairie back, but there is work going on right now, and they're starting to get better at transitioning some of this cropland back to at least native grasses. It's unclear whether you can restore the whole community, but at least they can get some of that grass, like those grass species, back there.
And some of the birds you're studying, would we ever see them around Regina, like in Wascana Park?
Not Wascana Park.
Like just, going west into the creek in there?
Right,
and
so
east?
none of these birds would be found kind of in and around Regina, but you wouldn't have to go very far to see some of them. There's a lot of protected areas just outside of Regina that, as long as it's large enough grassland and kind of has a native component, like a native grass component, then you might see some of these native species.
Probably not now.
When we talk about native grasses, we're referring to grasses that were here before European settlement.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that you see anywhere where the ground's been broken up, been plowed, is pretty much not going to be native. They're easily disturbed.
And you might even see some of the species on some of these tame areas, but they definitely do prefer that grassland that originated in the area.